we found there's stories that we have found throughout Florida that are left uncovered or unshared unless we have these types of platforms. And this particular story, as we take a look at America 250, we've learned that around the country, Florida's involvement has been an asterisk for a variety of reasons, and Dr. Head will share exactly why and give you some more detail. But one of the important elements of this platform is that we can take these stories with scholarship and good journalism and package it in a way where teachers such as yourself, dedicated teachers that arrive at seminars after the school bell has rung, um, and take it back to the classroom so that students are informed, they understand their state and realize and believe that their state is important to every aspect of the story. And they know where they get their facts. And that's what we're trying to do. We want to make sure we find the story and share the story. Florida Humanities has been doing this for 50 years. The programs around the state are free and open to the public. So not just this part of this segment, take a look at other elements if you're available around the state and floridahumanities.org. We have a calendar of events, and there are a variety of programs and activities online and in person that can help enrich your classrooms. I really appreciate your attendance. I'm happy you're here, and you're in for a treat. I heard David speak about a month ago, and was he's intriguing, dynamic, and I look forward to getting the feedback from this class of participants after this is done. So, Jody, thank you.
Thank you very much. And we still have a few people coming in. So, again, if your name is not on your little box, please make sure that it is so that we can take attendance. And also, we're going to wait until after David Head's presentation for questions and answers. So if you do have questions that come up, please put them in the chat, and I will keep an eye on that throughout his presentation. So I'm very excited to introduce Dr. David Head. He is a historian, author, and lecturer of history at the University of Central Florida in Orlando. He is also a distinguished faculty fellow in history at Kentucky Wesleyan, I hope I pronounced that right, College. He has published 5 books, including A Crisis of Peace, George Washington, The Newburgh Conspiracy, and The Fate of the American Revolution, which received honorable mention for the Journal of the American Revolution's Best Book Award. It was also finalist for the 2020 George Washington Book Prize. Most recently, he was co-editor of A Republic of Scoundrels, the schemers, intriguers, and adventurers who created a new American nation. Sorry about that. In addition to his academic work, David has written for USA Today, the Orlando Sentinel, the Bulwark, and the Current. And it is my pleasure to turn things over to Dr. Head.
Well, thank you very much for that invitation, and thank you again for having me to address the group here as part of the newspaper in education program. We were talking before the event began, and I was just marveling at how you as teachers are coming in to listen to more history stuff after a long day dealing with teenagers. So I certainly appreciate your dedication to your profession and to sharing the stories of history with our students. This is an especially important topic this year. Earlier this school year in the fall, my oldest daughter, who's in 5th grade, came home. She got in the car during the car line, and she told me that she had news that I would enjoy. She first told me to settle down first. That she was assigned to do a presentation on one of Britain's colonies before the American Revolution, and she was right. I needed to settle down. So I told her immediately which one she should do. I told her, do East Florida. She said, "No, Dad," right, in that tone. "It has to be one of the original 13 colonies." I'm like, "What? What? It's Florida. It's one of the British colonies too." That, but the teacher didn't understand that. So I sent her to school the next day with a copy of the Forgotten Front magazine to go show her teacher. So hopefully we can encourage, if you're doing colonial America, Florida is part of that too. Okay, so today's plan. First, I want to talk about what British Florida was. Okay, so there were two British Florida colonies, East Florida and West Florida. They were very imaginative in their naming. So I'll talk a little bit about what those two places were. Then I'll address the question of why they stayed loyal to the king, why they did not join the other colonies to the north in rebelling against the king. That's something that requires some explanation. Then once that's set in place, I'll talk about each of the colonies, East Florida and West Florida, and their military experience during the war. I'll talk first about 3 U.S. invasions of East Florida. An invasion of St. Augustine, I should say not of St. Augustine, against St. Augustine. You'll see why that distinction is important in a minute. Then a battle that took place at Thomas Creek. And finally, another battle that took place at Alligator Creek Bridge. And I just want to point out here, is there a more Florida name for a battle than the Battle of Alligator Creek Bridge? We'll then turn to three other campaigns led by the Spanish, not the Americans, but the Spanish against the British in West Florida. So first I'll talk about why Spain was involved in the American Revolution at all. Then I'll take each of their campaigns in turn. The first against Baton Rouge, launched from New Orleans, and then another against Mobile, and the third against Pensacola, the climactic battle of the campaign. This is a statue that has been erected within the last 10 years in Pensacola, in their town square there by they have a pier down there, I think is what's down there. This is the figure of Bernardo de Galvez, who led the Spanish conquest of the West Florida. Okay, so that's there today. Right. First of all, what exactly was British Florida? Florida is this territory here in the green. Okay, you see the map lacks some details about the area down here, more detailed up here. So this region had been won by the British from Spain during the 7 Years' War that concluded in 1763. You may know it better by its name for the North American theater of that war, the French and Indian War. So French and Indian War, 7 Years' War are synonymous here in North America. What had happened during the war is that the British were mostly victorious, and there are a whole bunch of land swaps coming out of the war. One of those land swaps involved the British conquest of Havana. So Britain had conquered Havana during the war, and Spain wanted that back, and they were willing to trade all of Florida for that one city, which gives you an idea of the relative importance of Florida compared to one place in Cuba at that time. And honestly, it was probably a good trade for the Spanish because they got one of their most important Caribbean ports back in their possession. Florida, they could, take it or leave it. The capital of East Florida was at St. Augustine. Okay, St. Augustine is there. That's their capital. Okay, so capital St. Augustine there. And West Florida stretched out from the Apalachicola River. That's the dividing point between East Florida and West Florida. And it stretched from the Apalachicola River westward to the Mississippi River, which means that West Florida colony included today's Panhandle, but also portions of Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana. So this is all once part of West Florida. Okay. Fun fact. The modern day division between the eastern time zone of Florida and the central time zone of Florida is also at the Apalachicola River. So it maps onto the borders of East Florida and West Florida. So if you're ever driving up to Destin or someplace up there in the Panhandle, there's that stretch of I-10 along here, which is very boring. You can enliven the conversation by pointing out as you pass over that bridge over the river, you'll see a sign that says now entering the central time zone. You can tell everyone about how that used to be the border between East Florida and West Florida. Okay. And then you'll be well launched on your way to the best road trip ever. Okay. So that's there. If you want a quick, I always like to point out a very quick history of Florida's settlement by Europeans and Americans. So it develops from North Florida along the I-10 corridor to what it would become the I-10 corridor. So that's first, then South Florida, that's second, and then Central Florida here is really Tampa's like 1880s-ish in there, and then Central Florida, Orlando, where I am, is post 1971. Okay, so that's a quick history of Florida's development. The people who live in the Floridas in the 1770s on the eve of the Revolution. First thing you'll note is the small population relative to the other North American British colonies. Okay. So in East Florida, there's a population of about 4,000 non-natives, and about 2,000 of those are enslaved people. So of the 4,000, half are enslaved. There is a small free black population, and the rest are people of British or Spanish ancestry. Or you also have the colony in New Smyrna, where is it Trumbull or Turnbull? I can't remember the gentleman's name, who recruited the people from Greece, okay, to settle there as indentured servants. Okay, that whole story. So diversity, but not very many people of European and African descent. It's about 2,000 natives or so, although that's very difficult to estimate. They're certainly not going down to South Florida to count the native population when they count in 1775. West Florida's population is much larger in terms of the natives who live there, or it can also be that because it's a smaller area, that's easier to count and estimate how many people there are. That's part of the way the statistics are gathered. But there's a somewhat larger non-native population, just a little bit bigger, 4,900, although a smaller enslaved population. Okay, so you see those numbers there. Now, I mentioned a few seconds ago the relative population size. This is so important because this is going to drive everything else about why Florida's colonists make the choices that they make in the war. The largest of the it kind of kills me to say this, the original 13. Okay, I like to put it the famous 13. That gets a little bit better for me. I feel a little bit better about that because there are a lot of other British colonies in North America. So compared to the largest of the famous 13, it's much smaller. So 500,000 population of Virginia that is white and enslaved. So that's the population in Virginia. That's the largest of those colonies. But even the smallest of those 13 colonies was Georgia, with a population of 40,000. So 10 times bigger than East Florida. And that's the smallest one of those. So just a much different scale in those 13 colonies compared to the Floridas. Now let's turn our attention to the critical question of why the colonists in Florida stayed loyal to the king. A question like this is often difficult to explain conceptually because you're trying to explain why they didn't do something. Why didn't they join the American rebellion? Okay, so some factors, any number of these factors, come together and influence different people in different combinations. But put together, this seems to be the best explanation of why the people of Florida were mostly content to stay a part of the British Empire. One of the things to understand is that the way the events that angered colonists in Massachusetts, New York, Pennsylvania, Virginia, a lot of those events simply landed differently in Florida because of the different situation in the Floridas. Okay. That's really abstract and vague. Let me give you an example of how one event can have two different impacts in the different places. The famous Proclamation of 1763. This was a proclamation by the king that attempted to limit westward movement of the colonists over the Appalachian Mountains into territories where the natives lived. Colonists coming out of the 7 Years' War, they think that one of their big rewards from that war, they think the reason the war was fought was to open up new lands for settlement. The British ejected the French from this territory, so now colonists are like all hot to go out there. It's like, yeah, right, it's free land for us. Okay, well, no, that just brings them into conflict with the natives who live there. The natives used to live out here, and there's conflict, and now they're pushed back over this way. And when the British colonists come into conflict with natives who have alliances with the British, okay, then it's the worst nightmare for a bureaucrat in London, because the bureaucrat in London has to actually do something about this. What they would like most to do is just to be peace. They don't care about justice or hurt feelings or anything. They just want there to be peace between the two sides. So they don't have to intervene. They don't have to send troops to the wilds of North America when those troops could be used for something better at home in Europe. Okay, so it roughly takes the peaks of the Appalachian Mountains as the boundary between the two. Okay. Now, another thing that's less understood, that's usually the way you teach it in school, right? A lesser understood clause of that proclamation actually allowed and encouraged movement by colonists north into Canada and south into the Floridas. Okay. So the idea was don't go over the Appalachian Mountains and bother natives there, okay? But you can move north and south. Now, there are also natives in that territory, but because there are so many fewer people of British descent, okay, the ability to absorb um, British colonists without conflict was much greater in these areas here. And it was also in the strategic interest of Britain to have these places better populated than they had been. So this proclamation, which is offensive to colonists in Pennsylvania and Virginia, for example, they see it as a breach of a promise that was made them, regardless of whether it was really a promise or not. They see this as their government turning on them, okay, and favoring natives instead of them. It's bad, and it's perceived very badly up in these colonies. But here in Florida, this is a great idea. It doesn't limit their ability to travel west to West Florida, and it's going to bring a greater population with more economic activity and more security because there are more people there. So it benefits Florida in a way that it harms colonists elsewhere. Another issue that would encourage Floridians to stay loyal to the king is simply geographic. It's the distance from the other colonies. One of the fun things that I learned when I was researching my Crisis of Peace book is I did a lot of work in the records of the Continental Congress. And one thing that I noticed that no one really remarked on that I can remember, because it seems so insignificant, is that Georgia was rarely represented in Congress in Philadelphia because of the distance, right? And it had gotten to the point when I was reaching the 1780s. By that point, it had gotten to be just expected that Georgia might show up sometimes, but they really wouldn't. So they would just kind of ignore Georgia's participation. And if there were a measure that needed the unanimous vote of 13 colonies, it was just understood that 12 would be good enough if Georgia weren't there. They're not going to wait on Georgia. Now, imagine what it would be like for East Florida or West Florida, so much more distant from Philadelphia, from other colonies. It's much more less likely they're going to be involved. So the distance at a time of difficult transportation really does make a difference. The colonists who live in Florida, they know that they need Britain in a way that people in other colonies like Boston and New York and Philadelphia and Virginia, people live up here, they believe that they can go it alone without Britain. As events escalate and push comes to shove, okay, Thomas Paine famously inspired in early 1776 Americans to have the confidence to challenge and possibly go it alone. That argument works in a place like New York, where, sorry, any New York City transplants, uh, back then as today, they tended to think of themselves as the center of the universe. Like, yeah, what do you mean? We don't need anywhere else. We're good enough. People in East Florida and West Florida, people in St. Augustine and in Pensacola, they know that they cannot survive without British protection. They need the British to protect them from attacks by their enemies like the Spanish or the French. They need the British to protect them from any native groups who might be hostile. They know that Britain protects them. As a result, taxes are a good deal to people in Florida. So even when taxes are raised, even when smuggling is cracked down on, even if the colonists in Florida don't necessarily like the process that was used to vote those taxes into existence, they still know that at the end of the day, they shouldn't rebel too hard about that. They can complain, but they're not going to rebel because they need Britain at the end when it comes down to it. Okay? So again, in New York, they can push back hard, but in Florida, as they know, we have to swallow a lot of this because we can't do it alone. A point that I like to note, especially when I'm doing a newspaper connected event, is that there was no newspaper to promote resistance in either East Florida or West Florida during the critical 1760s and 1770s. So you think of those newspapers that are kind of egging things on in Boston and Philadelphia and New York and places like that, and sharing information and bringing information to the latest outrage from elsewhere in the colonies to really gin up everybody's emotions. You may have used in class the famous print of the Boston Massacre done by Paul Revere, that engraving, and then that circulated to the other colonies, okay, to make them angry about a slaughter in Boston. Well, that just can't be done the same way in East Florida and West Florida because they have no newspaper there to publish it. East Florida does not have a legislature, colonial legislature. West Florida does, but East Florida didn't. Uh, Again, think of Boston, where some of the radicals in Boston tried to use the colonial legislature to organize and promote resistance. Can't do that when there is no colonial legislature in East Florida. Finally, colonists in East and West Florida are pragmatic. And when they look ahead to what the outcome might be, joining the Americans doesn't seem especially desirable. They believe that the Patriots will probably lose. And that's a very good bet at pretty much any point during the war before the ink is dry on the final treaty. And the Americans were in bad shape throughout the whole thing. Uh, so it doesn't take a lot of imagination to predict that the Patriots would probably lose. And you don't want to join the losing side. Even if the Patriots do win by some miracle, the residents of Florida know that the United States will probably give that territory to Spain as a reward for Spain fighting alongside the United States. Spain will grab that territory. So the Patriots, the colonists in Florida, they'll have one path. They'll keep them secure and safe and prosperous, and that is for the status quo to prevail. That means a British victory in the war. All right, now let me turn to the military aspects of the American Revolution in Florida. And first, I'm going to talk about 3 American invasions of East Florida. And you're going to see in a second here why I said there's an attack launched against St. Augustine, but not exactly in St. Augustine. Okay. The early conflict. So before we get to the actual invasion, as the war was beginning, you have a lot of low-level conflict. So not formal military engagements, but a lot of kind of raiding across the border undertaken by individuals. So just small parties, 8 guys, 10 guys, 15 guys might get together right across the border and attack a plantation, steal cattle, kidnap, enslave people, burn the plantation to the ground. Okay, so this was done both ways. So both Floridians raiding the plantations of patriots in Georgia, and then Georgia patriots raiding over to loyalist plantations in East Florida. And again, this would be done kind of just tit for tat, back and forth. Not a formal military engagement, but constant harassment. Again, going both ways. Another important development is that there is a significant movement of loyalists from places like Georgia and the Carolinas. People who are being harassed at home in Georgia and the Carolinas, whose plantations were burned by patriots, and who want to just get out of there, get away from the violence. One place that they can easily move to and start again is in East Florida. The governor of East Florida encourages this movement because they want migrants from abroad. So he will give them grants of land. So just give away free land to induce people to move to Florida and exempt them from property taxes for 10 years to get them started. you'll notice we really don't have to give land away for free anymore in Florida, right, to induce people to come. And I did like to note that idea that's been floated in the Florida legislature about eliminating property taxes. Well, that goes back to the British period of no taxes. So you see there. Also note, I was very excited when I found this picture, this depiction of the governor's house in 1764. So that was very neat to find there. Okay. Okay, so the military campaign against St. Augustine in 1776. The Continental Congress, as the war is moving into that year, Continental Congress wants an attack by the Continental Army against St. Augustine. The goal is not necessarily to capture St. Augustine itself. That's not I mean, that's an intermediary goal. The long-term reason for doing this is to protect Georgia from those cross-border raids. A secondary objective by capturing St. Augustine would be to weaken the British shipping along the Florida coast. Let me go back to a map here. Let me show you why that's important. Okay. So if you look here, the way that you would travel from the Caribbean, the Western Caribbean over here, okay, you can't go from Cancun. It wasn't exactly a party area back then, but just imagine it is. Can't go from Cancun over here straight back to Spain. Can't do that, the way the wind and the currents go. So you need to stop in Havana first if you're Spanish. If you're not, you don't stop there. But regardless, you go up this way, and then you take the channel here, the Florida Straits, in this relatively narrow area between Florida on this side and the Bahamas on this side. And the Bahamas, there are a lot of shoals here, so this is fairly not narrow, shallow water here. So you can easily wreck over here. And of course, this is solid land, so you can wreck over here too. So if you're an enemy of the Spanish or any country operating here, you wouldn't go chasing them around the Caribbean. That's hard to find. You would just sit at the top of the channel here and wait for your enemy to come to you. Okay. So St. Augustine is important for providing support to keep this open. The British are able to keep this open for their shipping and to potentially attack any Spanish shipping that comes up through there. The Americans think that by gaining control of St. Augustine and this territory here, then they'll be able to harass British shipping coming through that channel. Okay, so it's all about geography and the wind and the currents here, because you catch the Gulf Stream and then you go back to Europe that way. Okay, so that's the geography there, why it matters. Okay. Okay. Oh, and finally, it would close that escape route for loyalists, and that would pressure them to stay in Georgia or the Carolinas, and possibly to, change their loyalty. Okay, the plan in 1776 and its problems. The really only way to march the army down from Georgia to St. Augustine is along what was called the King's Road. This is a road that had been constructed by the British to connect the two British colonies. Okay. Well, the enemy knows you're coming down that one road. Okay. The only alternative is the swamps, and you're not going to really want to trudge through the swamps for very long. Not that you really want to walk to Florida from Georgia under any circumstances, but definitely don't want to go through the swamps. There are two major water crossings down this route here. The British know where those are, so they know just to wait for you there. Okay? You're going to have to go through it. So they can just wait to attack you at one of these two places. And the British know all this, so they can just wait for you to come to them. Now, let's just assume, for argument's sake, let's just indulge this plan for a minute. Let's assume that you can march your troops all the way down this road to St. Augustine. You're going to lay siege to St. Augustine. What that means is that the attacking force is going to be on the outside, and they're going to dig towards St. Augustine. These trenches will provide cover from the enemy shooting down at them, because you dig and then you put the dirt up there and you get cover down there. And you want to get close enough that you can put your big guns, your siege guns, into place and then open up on the fort. Well, good luck getting those large guns down this road where the enemy knows you're coming, and definitely not going to want to take those through the swamps. You're also going to need to blockade St. Augustine, because when you're laying siege, you don't want the enemy to either escape or to be resupplied, because then they'll be able to outlast you. as you're attacking. That leads to the next point. You're going to need to resupply yourself down the road where everyone knows, the enemy knows that you're coming. Okay? So good luck doing any of those things. Good luck doing a blockade because the British Army, the British Navy is large and highly professional. The American Navy, most of what they do, especially early on, is that they fight over which colony is going to get to build the ships. And they end up commissioning 13, so everybody can have one. They can't share. Um, so that's not going to be happening. And good luck recording this supply down here. Okay. The part of the force does move out in uh, the late spring, early summer of 1776. The Georgia militia, so not part of the regular army, but the militia, they attack Amelia Island and capture it. So Amelia Island is up here. Maybe some of you have visited there. I like Amelia Island a lot. So that was a scene of a great Georgian victory over the British forces in Florida. They gained control over this area in the St. Johns River. That's as far as the American forces get. Because the commander of the Continental Army, General Charles Lee, he waits in Charleston until the summer, and he doesn't want to go because he knows that this whole plan is stupid, right? And he doesn't want to be the leader of a plan that's going to end in an embarrassing defeat and get a lot of guys killed and derail his career, right? He's not going, doesn't want to do this. This is dishonorable and a bad move career-wise. So he puts it off as long as he can. Eventually, he can't put it off any longer, and he moves out, reaches Savannah on August 7th, and then the next day, he learns that he's been recalled to Philadelphia to lead an operation in the north there. And Savannah is a lovely place, but I bet there was no one ever who was happier to leave Savannah, Georgia, than General Charles Lee out of this embarrassing fiasco as quickly as possible. He was succeeded in command by a man named William Moultrie. If you know Charleston and the low country of South Carolina at all, you may have recognized that name. It's a prominent Moultrie family in that area. William Moultrie is given command, but by the time he gets there and gets organized, he's had so many men lost, either to desertion or disease. The yellow fever spreads right in August in that part of the Georgia, not healthy, and they just give it up. They give up the invasion. So most of the army never leaves Georgia. They never even get close to laying siege to St. Augustine. Okay. This way. The next year, Congress says, we still want Georgia secured. Army, go back there. Do it better this time. So this time they have the Army develops a plan that they're going to have a joint land-sea operation. Okay? So they're going to move some men by land and some men by sea. They'd rendezvous and attack the British. So 400 men are going to move by sea under a commander, a Colonel Samuel Elbert, and another 109 mounted militia, so they're on horseback, will move by land under Colonel John Baker. Baker gets to the rendezvous point, and he waits. No sign of Colonel Elbert. He waits a little longer. No sign of Colonel Elbert. He starts to realize that some natives allied with the British are making contact, scouting out his position. He falls back to a more fortified position, Thomas Creek, which is in there somewhere. It's a relatively small creek, so its course has changed over the years, right? It changes, doesn't stay in the same place. And as far as there's development and everything, okay. So that's why I can't really tell exactly where it was. There's a native raid. They're able to fend it off, but now the enemy knows exactly where they are, and they can't stay there forever. So they can't push forward. They can't exactly evacuate because what if Elbert shows up and then he's going to abandon Elbert to his fate there? Eventually, the British find them, and the American encampment is attacked. The fleeing soldiers are driven. Okay, they're driven by a bayonet-wielding blocking force. Okay, so there's a small number of attackers run the camp and push the Americans back towards another British force that has the bayonets, and they make quick work of the Americans. Meanwhile, whatever happened to the seaborne force? Well, they also landed at Amelia Island, and they're able to take control over Amelia Island. So the Americans are good at invading and capturing Amelia Island. So that's a positive. But the way the island is, So the island itself, and then the surrounding, the mainland is slightly higher on a slight elevation over the island. And last time I was there, I noticed this. Oh yeah, this is just like it was in 1777. Um, and the British put some gun emplacements on that higher ground, and the Americans just cannot get off. The British control the high ground. It's not even that much higher. Have a little bit of elevation, and they cannot. The British Americans cannot get over there. They just can't. They can't do it. So they give up and they abandon Amelia Island. Okay, so far, that's the only place the Americans have been able to attack, but they do not hold it. Finally, the next year, the Americans try one more time. The British are still raiding into Georgia, and Georgia is still not secure. So the Americans then move into East Florida. They march south. And along the way, they're harassed by a British loyalist unit called the East Florida Rangers, a unit of militia. They're led by a man who had been a planter in Georgia and had fallen victim to the violence of a Patriot attack. His plantation had been burned to the ground, and he had been severely burned and injured during the engagement. So he's doing this, leading this East Florida Rangers against the Americans, not only out of loyalty to the king, but for personal vengeance against his enemy. Okay. So the Americans are pushing forward, and they're harassed along the way by the East Florida militia. A British force had also dug in at Alligator Creek Bridge. This is where the King's Road, okay, King's Road, split, with one spur going to Amelia Island and the main road going down to St. Augustine. Okay. So that's a strategic position there. So British entrenched here, dug in here, and the Rangers harassing up here. So one day, the Americans gain the upper hand, and they are chasing the Rangers down the road here, back towards this bridge, where the Americans don't know, but there are British encamped there. So the Rangers are leading them back to their own force here. Well, nobody on that day, neither the Americans nor the Rangers have uniforms on. They all have their hunting shirts. And nobody knows who anyone else is. So the British, when they see a lot of armed men galloping at them quickly, they open fire on their own guys and some Americans. Okay, so everybody is just fire at them, and then no, we're on your side, and they kind of sort this out. They sort it out. The Americans pull back because they see they're outnumbered. Then the Rangers, ones who are left alive, they regroup, they outflank the Americans, and they're able to make quick work of them by getting the Americans on two sides then. Okay. After that battle, the Americans give up their attempts on attacking East Florida. General Lincoln, Benjamin Lincoln, who's the commander in the Southern Theater of Operations, writes to General Washington, "It would be embarrassing and unsafe to attempt an expedition against the province." And I like the way he puts it in the future tense there. It would be embarrassing. It has been embarrassing for 3 years, and they finally give it up. The British then counterstrike against Savannah in December, and their troops from East Florida join in that attack. The East Florida Rangers support the British in that attack. The rest of the war then, East Florida is safe from the Americans. Trade picks up. The population is growing up to 17,000, all right? So 4,000 into 17,000 in 8 years. Okay, that's the Florida that we know, doubling population, right? They have a popularly elected assembly that they didn't have before. They start publishing a newspaper over here, okay? And then everything's going well until peace arrives. And peace for the British colonists is a disaster because Spain does get the Floridas, and they do take over in 1784, and they do force the loyalists out. What the loyalists 10 years earlier had foreseen as their probable fate. So I'd like to point this out. This is good because you think peace arrives and everything will be good because it's the absence of war. But for the residents, the British colonists of East Florida, peace was the disaster because the British left. Next, I want to turn to 3 Spanish conquests of West Florida. And this is where the story gets more successful for the American side, although there aren't very many Americans actually involved in this part of the war. Let me talk briefly about why Spain joins the American Revolution. They declared war officially in 1779. The French had joined the Americans in an alliance the previous year. Okay. Now, Spain and the United States are never officially allies, okay? But they do have a common friend, France. both the United States and Spain have an alliance of their own with France. They don't have an alliance with each other, but they do have an alliance with France, each of them. And perhaps more importantly, Spain, like France, like the United States, is an enemy of Britain. What's the saying about the enemy of my enemy is my friend? Okay, that's the situation here. The Spanish, their goals are one, to diminish British power, two, to gain revenge from the 7 Years' War. I attended a conference in the fall, and one of the speakers talked about how he's read the diplomatic correspondence of both the Spanish and the French in this period, and they come out and say expressly, we want revenge. Okay? They come out, they say that as one of their objectives is revenge against the British. Okay? So that's a goal. And then also territories. And you might be thinking, well, they probably want Florida back. No, the Spanish don't want Florida back. They want places like Gibraltar, okay? The gateway to the Mediterranean, part of Spain, but the British had captured that during the 7 Years' War. So they really want that tiny Gibraltar, not Florida. Okay, but they'll eventually get what they can. Okay. I mentioned Bernardo de Galvez before. He's the military governor of Spanish Louisiana. Okay. Just very quickly here, Louisiana had been French until the end of the 7 Years' War, when France gave Louisiana to Spain. Okay. And so it's Spanish in this period between 1763 and then 1800, when the French take it back. Okay. So this is in the Spanish period of Louisiana history. Galvez knew that the declaration of war was coming, so he was ready to go. By September of that year, he has a force assembled, and he's going to first march against the British fort at Baton Rouge. Today, Baton Rouge spans the Mississippi River, but in this period, it was only on the eastern side of the river, which put it in British West Florida. You got that? Eastern shore of the river puts it in West Florida. Okay, so that's a British held territory there. Galvez leads his force out in September, which of course is prime hurricane season. So they are sent back by the hurricane. They regroup and they take off again. One of the things I wonder about during our hurricane season is that we get lots of warning when a hurricane might be coming. But in this period, they have no real warning, that a major storm is coming, not just a regular thunderstorm, which you get every day, but it's going to be a major devastating storm. Okay? So that I just wonder how they live like that. Something I've always wondered every year. The Spanish they travel up here through the bayous in the backcountry here. They first lay siege to a kind of dilapidated fort left over from the French Indian War called Fort Butte. And then they lay siege to Baton Rouge. Again, they dig their trenches and move their guns in, and they overrun the fort. Here is a painting made by a contemporary Spanish artist, so someone who's living today. And I could look at this painting for a very long time. It's just wonderful. It's lifelike realism. A couple of things I want to point out. You see the diversity of the force that the artist has depicted here. That's real. So you see the Native American here as an ally of the Spanish, the ally of the Spanish. You see another Native American here. You see this gentleman here, okay, person of color. There's a free person of color population in New Orleans who are joining this expedition, part of the militia there. Another guy back here. Okay, see how some of these men have uniforms, the white uniform of the regular Spanish army, but others are in just regular shirt clothes like this. So he must be militia. So it must be militia, right? Militia, regular army, regular army. That, of course, is Galvez looking very heroic on his mighty steed. Okay. I love this guy here. He's like, come on, guys, right? Can you pick up the pace? It's going to take us forever. And the poor guy with the drum is like, can't you march on your own for a while? Okay, just march. I don't have to beat the beat for you on my drum. Just do it on your own. Okay, so you see that there. Again, I love that painting. That's there. Okay, next year, target number 2, Mobile, again in West Florida. The plan of attack is that the Spanish, they sail over from New Orleans. They enter the bay. Excuse me. If you've been to Mobile, the bay there is very wide. So they enter that area. Um, so sailing here, they land here, and then they begin advancing on Mobile itself. Mobile is guarded in this period by a fort named Charlotte. So Fort Charlotte is where the British emplacement here is. Towards it. Now, part of defending against the siege is when you see the enemy advancing towards you, you send out a messenger to other installations that are nearby. In this case, Pensacola. And the message like, right, we're under attack. Come save us. So the British are sending reinforcements to lift the siege, right, to reinforce their troops here and then drive the Spanish out. The British relief force come to save the day, gets to here. They settle in overnight. They've had a long day of marching. Okay, they're exhausted. It's just it'll take us an hour or so. We'll get to Mobile the next morning. Okay, we'll get there in the morning. Easy time tomorrow morning. They're woken up the next morning at dawn as the day is beginning by the sound of heavy cannon firing. They know what that sound is. That's the sound of the siege guns. The Spanish have accomplished their objective. They've gotten close enough that they can just pummel the British into surrender, and the relief force is literally hours too late. I like to imagine that they look at each other and say, "I told you not to stop at Buc-ee's. Okay? Just told you we didn't need those snacks. We could get them when we got to our destination." But they don't. And I think that's a good example of just how close it comes sometimes, right? I mean, no one, they're exhausted, right? There's a reason they didn't go. They didn't think the Spanish, a few hours would make a difference, but it did. And that's sometimes what it comes down to. Target number 3, the next year. This is the big one because it's the capital of West Florida. Okay? And if the Spanish can conquer here, then they can gain control over the whole colony. Pensacola is very well defended, as befitting a colonial capital. The way you would enter Pensacola itself is you have to go through the seas here, this inlet here, and then turn up towards Pensacola. There's a British gun emplacement here and a British gun emplacement here. So as you're sailing in between, you might be pummeled from both sides. Okay, so very well defended. Assuming that you can get past here and make landfall, there's a fort, okay, guarding Pensacola, and the fort is protected by 2 redoubts. A redoubt is like a kind of a miniature fort, right? It has the cannon emplacements there that they could shoot beyond the fort to an enemy as it was laying siege. Okay, so very well defended. If you've ever been to Pensacola, one of the things you may remember, if you notice this is slightly higher ground up here. Okay, slightly higher, so you give a little bit of elevation advantage there. Okay, so that's Fort George, Queen's Redoubt, Prince of Wales Redoubt. Okay, so very well defended. Galvez, again, the commander of the operation, wants to enter Pensacola Bay. He has a problem, though, because most of his men are being carried by the Spanish Navy, and their commander is out of Cuba, out of Havana. And he says, no way. The British have that so well defended. I'm not going in there and getting all of my ships wrecked. I'm not doing it. And then it's under his direct command, the one that brought him from New Orleans to Havana, where they linked up with most of the forces there. Okay, so Galvez has 1 ship, and he tells his men, tries to inspire them, says, "Whoever has honor and courage, follow me. I'm going in there," and he does. He's able to prove that you could go and sail a particular route that would keep you safe from the gun emplacements on both sides. They weren't as dangerous as had been first imagined. Galvez then later addresses his men in celebration. He says, "I, my sons, went alone to sacrifice myself so as not to expose a single soldier." Like, you did it all by yourself, huh? Right? Sailed the ship all by yourself. Later on, Galvez revealed himself to be not only a brave commander, but also a very effective self-promoter. Politics is part of the job if you want to have want to rise high, right? So in his letters to the king, he polishes all these statements to "Yo solo, I alone," and that kind of sticks in the king's mind. And Galvez then adds that phrase to his coat of arms, so that effectively that's his brand. When he's not there, everybody thinks, "Yeah, Galvez, the Yo solo guy. Give him the job, give him the honors. He deserves it." So very effective branding by Galvez. Okay, so the Spanish forces, they push their way in, they regroup here, then they sail up to here and lay siege. Just dig, dig, dig again. Okay, they're digging against Pensacola. One morning, as the Spanish are firing on the fort and the redoubts here, there's a shot that gets into the powder magazine. Powder magazine is where you store all the gunpowder. You're supposed to keep the door to that thing closed all the time. I know somebody just forgot or what, but a shot got in there and there's an enormous explosion. So an enormous explosion at the Queen's redoubt. Once the Spanish troops hear that, they know it's go time, right? Everybody goes and they storm the fort. The British commander sees that all is lost and he sends out the white flag and negotiates terms for surrender so that he doesn't get his own, so he doesn't get anybody unnecessarily killed. No reason to dig in and fight when you know your fate is sealed. The larger importance of this episode is that Britain has now lost a colony that did not rebel. So not only are they failing to make progress in New York or Pennsylvania or Virginia or South Carolina, now they're going backwards. They're losing colonies over to not the Americans, but certainly to the American side. That's not good. Notice here the date, May of 1781. In October 1781 is the Battle of Yorktown, and the British are again defeated in that battle. And that's a much more important strategic victory at Yorktown, certainly. But notice that it's the second major surrender in that same year. So it's now impossible for anyone in Britain to argue that Yorktown is just a one-off. Yeah, that happened one time, but things happen. It's just once. We'll regroup and go get them. No, it's the second time it's happened in the same year. That means something is wrong, and that argument weighs heavily on British policymakers and eventually able to convince the British ministry becomes convinced that they cannot win in this situation, that they'll have to seek a end to the war that includes independence for the United States. I want to thank you for listening to my presentation today. I have my contact information here if anyone should like to get in touch after our time together today is at an end. I'm available now for questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. And again, thank you for devoting your time here today to my presentation.
So you can put your questions in the chat, or you can unmute. We do have one question in the chat for you. The question is, are the reasons that the Canadian colonies, what are the reasons that the Canadian colonies stayed loyal? Are they similar to those of Florida?
Okay, so yes, that's a great question. So there are actually two other regions to ask the same question about. The Canadian colonies, Upper and Lower Canada, is the way the British organized it, and then some of the maritime colonies there, and then also the Caribbean colonies, right? There are British colonies in the Caribbean that have to face the same question. So again, a lot of it has to do with their particular circumstances, the relatively smaller population, the distance from the guys organizing the rebellion effort. In Canada, a major role is religion. The French population there, okay, in Quebec, right? The French-speaking population in Quebec is Catholic, and they had the Catholic Church there had been protected by the agreement that ended the war. Okay, so they get a kind of status for Catholicism and the French legal system that is not extended to other colonies. Okay, so they're happy. They're relative. I mean, not happy. They'd like to be part of France, but they are happy enough. They have enough protection for their faith, for their way of life, their culture, their legal system, and it's not like the Americans can be trusted to be friendly towards Catholicism, right? There's often a lot of kind of generally Protestant antipathy towards Catholics and towards fears about the Pope as a political figure trying to pull the strings against liberty everywhere in the world. That kind of imagery is very common in the American colonies. So if you are French Canadian, right, living there, you can either continue to live under the British rule, which has a track record of keeping the peace. Okay. Now, the British don't necessarily like Catholics any more than the Americans did, all part of the Anglo-Protestant worldview at the time. But at least they've proven, right, that they will have a kind of modus vivendi, right? There. You don't know what the American colonists are going to do. Okay? So what you know is better than what you don't. If I could just expand that to the Caribbean situation, in the Caribbean, a major factor, again, is a small population and the fact that they know they need the British to protect them. In the Caribbean, again, a major driving force of staying loyal to the British is that the English population, the European population, is vastly outnumbered by the enslaved population. So what someone in like St. Lucia or St. Kitts, for example, or Jamaica, let's do a big one, Jamaica, they want the British military in their colony. They want British attention to protect them from slave rebellion. So when the Americans get angry about the quartering of soldiers in their colony, they see it as a sign of a standing army is a sign against liberty, right? The Jamaica say, no, send more guys. We want more British troops here because we want them to protect us from the enslaved population that has every reason to rebel and harm us. So just different factors work differently in different parts of the British Empire.
And somebody just asked if Florida, as a British colony, did any trading with the Caribbean prior, during, and after the Revolution.
Well, that's a great question. I don't know offhand what exactly the trade patterns are. I assume that there is trade with some of those regions. Um, the British interest in the Floridas is overwhelmingly strategic. So any trade that they do is kind of a bonus. Um, you know, yeah, I don't know offhand exactly what the economic basis of the colonies is, what the relationships are with the other parts of the British Empire. Those are great questions. So that'll be, well, I'll have to note to myself to look that up more in the future. I'd really focus on the military aspect of the conflict here. But yeah, the economic background will be fascinating as well.
One of the things I learned when I was doing my research for the publication was
Mhm.
that the native tribes
Oh,
did a
right.
lot of
Yes.
trading
Yes.
with the British Crown.
Right. Exactly. Thank you for that reminder. Yes. So a lot of those are trading. They're like trading posts where the natives will, kill the animals, bring their pelts, and that's one of the valuable exports, right? And that helps to cement the alliances between native groups and the British, because the natives have an incentive to keep those relationships going also. You're muted, Jody.
I apologize for that. I didn't mean to be muted. There is a really loud seagull that is outside my window,
Oh,
and
okay.
it keeps making all of these noises. So I thought I should mute. The follow-up question on that is, did the British Army recruit people from the Caribbean to fight?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of that.
Did the British Army recruit people from the Caribbean to fight?
So most of the troops are sent from England, Scotland, the British the British Isles. There's just and whatever men of military age, again, not enslaved people of military age, but the Anglo population of military age, they're going to be needed for the militia. Okay, they're not going to really go fight in North America. They're needed at home. And there just aren't that many, especially when you consider how much they're outnumbered by the enslaved population. The statistic that pops to my mind is I believe that in Jamaica, it's 5% white, 95% black in the 18th century in Jamaica. So some of those colonies are 90% or more enslaved population. So yeah, they would serve in the militia and they're just needed at home. They're not going to go fight anywhere else.
Did anybody else have questions? I'm not seeing any questions. It's okay if you unmute.
Yes, it'd be nice to have some audience interaction here. That's one of the strange parts about giving a lecture online is I'm in a room by myself talking and imagining you, but I don't get to interact. So,
I am not seeing any hands up or any questions. Oh, somebody just said he's on his home computer with no video or audio. That would be
okay.
it. That would be a problem.
Hmm.
We've got some applause for you coming up. Little icons. Well, if you guys don't have any questions, we can move on to the next portion. Um, there's a whole bunch of thank yous for you in the chat.
Well,
Um,
yeah, yes. Well, thank you very much again. I've enjoyed our time together is not quite right, but virtually together. And again, I hope that you found this useful and that you can take some of this information into your classroom and share these stories with your students. That will be very gratifying to me. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I learn something every time I hear it. Um, okay, so we're going to talk a little
I
bit
actually
about.
have a question. I'm so sorry.
Oh,
Do you
that's
guys
okay.
by any chance have like maybe like smaller books for maybe smaller kids? I work with like elementary schoolers, and I'm a Florida native myself, and I would like to teach a little bit of history towards our students.
So no, I'm sorry. I don't know that market very
Oh,
well. The elementary school, I just don't have contact with it very often.
no,
And
it's okay.
certainly not something about uh, American Revolution in Florida specifically. It makes me wish I had a time machine to go back a few years. I could have produced it right for this year. Um, yeah, I missed that one, I guess. So anyway, yeah, I'm sorry, nothing really comes to mind.
Okay. Thank you very much. I am going to show you the curriculum supplement where you can actually pull some things out, maybe to talk to younger students. Also, I'm kind of fascinated by the maps, the idea that Florida was so different, and the fact that there was. We seem to be kind of a separate world out here in Florida. So let me go ahead and share my screen if I can do that. I am so used to going back and forth between Teams and Zoom that I often forget where I am. Okay, here we go. There we go. Okay, so some of you are actually NIE teachers, and some of you are not. We have quite a mix with us today of people from different counties and teaching in different schools, which I think is wonderful. So I'm going to tell you just a little bit about our program, and then we're going to kind of dive into the curriculum that we have available. So this is the website that I'm going to talk about all the time. It's tampabay.com/NIE. And all of our materials are available on this website. They are available free of charge. And if you are interested in getting physical newspapers or digital access to newspapers, I'm going to tell you how to do that as well. This is just a little background about me. I have been teaching since around 1990. I started when I was a little kid, though, so don't try to do the math to figure out how old I am. And I am currently an adjunct professor at St. Leo University in Hillsborough. Oh, there's a typo there, Hillsborough College now. In addition to working at the Tampa Bay Times. I do a lot of our curriculum writing, and I spend, unfortunately, a lot of time on CPOMs. So that we can make sure things are ready for you to use in your classroom. So for those of you who don't know, NIE is a cooperative effort between schools and the newspaper to promote the use of newspapers in print and electronic form as educational resources. I don't know about your students, but my students who are older have often never seen a newspaper. When I ask them where they get their news from, tell me in the chat where your students get the news from. What do you think? Oh, I've lost my chat capabilities here. Where did it go? I lost it. There we go. Social media, TikTok, the talking fish. Yes, absolute parents. Oh, I like that. ChatGPT, that's a little that makes me a little scared. Yes, most of them are getting it from Instagram. They're getting it, from TikTok. They are getting it from places that are maybe not reputable. Most students today are not on Facebook, which means that most of the news they're getting, they're interpreting from either videos or photos. So our goal here at the Times is to get students to understand the importance of reading and to make them lifelong readers. So just a little, background information. One of the reasons that using the newspaper in your classroom is a great idea is because it gets students engaged in their communities and it gets them building daily habits. When I ask my older students if they read every day, they usually tell me texts. That's about the extent of what they're reading. So the newspaper is a great link to what you're teaching in the classroom and to connect that to the real world. We all know that informational text is a big buzzword right now. Newspapers are informational text. It is nonfiction. It has both primary and secondary sources. It has information on facts and opinions. And it has all kinds of different formats. So when we talk about informational text, we're talking about words, we're talking about images, we're talking about cartoons, maps, statistics on the sports page. And research does show that students who use the newspaper as an educational resource score more highly on standardized tests. One of the reasons for that is because they have to read. Another thing it does is it makes them more engaged citizens. One of the things that I've noticed when talking to young people is they kind of have no idea what's going on around the world around them. They do know what they see on politics, but that a lot of them don't know what's actually going on day to day. So one of the interesting things I had a conversation with my students is they had no idea we were in a drought. And I thought that was kind of interesting. The conversation came up, somebody was talking about washing their car. And I said, there's only certain days you're allowed to wash your car now. So they had no idea that there was a drought. So these are things I just talked about with informational text, primary and secondary sources. You guys are all familiar with that as well. Media literacy, news literacy is very important because it gives them critical thinking skills. It makes them not necessarily accept everything that is thrown out there. Newspapers, actual print newspapers have a little bit of an advantage over news broadcasts when it comes to credibility, because once you put something in print, it is in print. So therefore, if the information is incorrect, the newspaper can get sued. So when something goes through the process of being actually in print, there's all these checks and balances. There's editors, there's copy editors, there's people who are checking on sources, all that kind of thing, which is important for students to know. Okay, so I am going to bring up, this is the publication that I was referring to. I just have to make a comment. Lisa put in the chat, if you want a good laugh, watch your high schoolers try to fold the newspaper. That is a great point. They are so not used to the format of a newspaper. They also don't know the difference between advertisements, advertorials, and news content. A lot of times when they're looking on social media, they're not aware that the information they're getting is actually paid for by someone else. And the newspaper has both of those things as well. The newspaper also has an index, and it has sections, and it has headlines and all that kind of fun stuff. So I'm going to try to, let's see if I can share my computer screen with you. Let's try this. Okay, so this is our website. This is the Tampa Bay Times newspaper and education website. We have all kinds of great stuff on here. If you go to our weekly lessons page, you will see that there's news videos, there's a little geography quiz, there's a vocabulary quiz. There are this use the news lessons by grade level is broken up K through 4, 5 through 8, and 9 through 12. And there are basically 5 topics that are covered every week that you can use for bell ringer activities, you can use for class discussions. Like I said, they update every week. There is a whole bunch of archives here. The unfortunate part about this particular activity is that we don't have there's no organized by subject archive. So it's only by date. Another really good tool is the front page talking points. And this will have reading information, a video, and then it will have 3 action points for discussions or writing prompts, whatever you want to do. And of course, there's an archive for this as well. So all this is located under weekly lessons. We also have our curriculum supplements, and this is broken down by subject area. And I'm, of course, going to click on social studies. If you scroll down a little bit, you will see the Forgotten Front. The Forgotten Front information, we have the publication, and we also have a teacher guide. So to look at the publication, I'm just going to click on it and open it up. Hopefully you're all seeing that. We have this great map on the front. All of the information here has been thoroughly researched. As you can see, all of the activities have the standards. We have the standards for middle and high school. We also have a timeline, which is something else that can be adapted for maybe younger students to talk about time period and that sort of thing. The Florida dates are, I believe that is blue. The Florida dates are in blue. So we talk about the difference between East and West Florida. We break it out into showing the different colonies. There's all sorts of clips of newspaper articles that were around during this time. As Dr. Head mentioned earlier, in Florida, there wasn't a newspaper. And we do know that a lot of the information that was coming from the northern states was coming from who? Tell me who our main printer was. No guesses? Yes, Benjamin Franklin, absolutely. And Benjamin Franklin was the key of propaganda. He knew exactly what to say to get people all riled up. So there's all kinds of newspaper clips in here as well, talking about different expeditions that happened. Again, the timeline, there are activities on each spread that you can use with your students. Most of the activities fall into the social studies and best standards. This area is talking specifically about East Florida, the East Florida Rangers, which were sort of a group of, Dr. Had mentioned this before, that some of the battles they were in, because they weren't wearing uniforms, they were kind of a guerrilla group of men, and they were, because they weren't wearing uniforms, a lot of times it got confused over who was fighting where. Again, we have an activity. Our center is talking all about newspapers. One of the most important ways of getting information was through newspapers during the Revolutionary War. You can see this join or die image down here. That was the first editorial cartoon that Benjamin Franklin created. We have talking about bias and propaganda. Here are our big battles: the Battle of Thomas Creek, the Siege of Pensacola, the Battle of Alligator Bridge. I love the name Alligator Bridge. We also have sections specifically focused on Native American voices. One of the things that we discovered, I borrowed some textbooks, some social studies textbooks from one of our counties to look at the information about the Revolutionary War, because we didn't want to duplicate anything. And one of the things I noticed is it's really not focused on Florida at all. And during this time period, there were more Native Americans living in this area than anywhere else. And they wanted loyalty to the crown because of business reasons. Which was kind of a fascinating thing for me, who was not born in Florida, to learn. This is more information talking about Native Americans. This is really an interesting one of the, and I don't remember the name of the book. I should have written that down. But one of the things that the impressions Florida got about Florida were gotten from people who wrote and drew maps and had all of these focusing on the nature. So Florida was filled with swamps and alligators and all kinds of dangerous things. Here we talk about the arrival of the Spanish, the fact that the social classes were very different in Florida. Again, we had lots of Native Americans, we had lots of enslaved people, and we also had a lot of British officers. As Dr. had mentioned, they were getting free land. So the people that were coming here, especially the women, were in a completely different category and were not necessarily prepared to be living in the areas of Florida where they were brought into. This was speaking about women. This was an interesting story. This was interesting information about, and I don't think I can make this. Oh, yes, I can. I can make that bigger. This was some information talking about one of the enslaved Americans' wives. We also have, oops. Yep, that's where I stopped. And the timeline we have goes through to, as you can see, 1784. So there's a lot of information here. If you are teaching, I know most of you are middle and high school. If you are teaching elementary, you can certainly pull things out. One of the things we did, and I'm going to show you, one of the things we did in the teacher guide. Oh, I just needed to go backwards. Let's go. One of the things we did in the teacher guide was we tried to focus on some of the other ways that you could use the material without necessarily focusing on having students read word for word. So we do have an index on here, a table of contents. And I am just, we have all kinds of activities. The standards are listed at the beginning. There's research activities. There are some helpful links in here that you can look at. The maps, again, are very fascinating. The census information is really interesting. George Washington thought that Florida was very important. He actually wrote more than 80 letters talking about Florida to the Continental Congress. And I think, off the top of my head, I know I'm going to get this wrong, but he tried several times to take Florida, to come in and get Florida as part of the original colonies, and it just was not very effective. There's information again about Native American tribes. We talk about the obviously there were lots of different tribes here at the beginning. We had the Lower Creek, the Upper Creek, the Chickasaw, and the Choctaw nations. And of course, a lot of those merged then into what we now know are the Seminole tribe. Talking a little bit about the role of free and enslaved Black people, as well as the role of women. Talking about newspapers, of course. I'm just going to scroll down here. Here's some information about analyzing maps. Talking about fact and opinion. We have a chart here for examining turning points. And I am going to jump down to, okay, so we do have some additional resources for you here as well. PBS, of course, has some great videos. These are here's a teacher guide that's focused on Fort Mose, which is very impressive. And then we have all of this stuff about editorial cartoons. So these are some of the original editorial cartoons. This is an example of the poor gentleman that was tarred and feathered and scalped by American colonists. This is these are showing different specific scenes. Again, these are editorial cartoons. When we go down further, the idea of treason. When we go down further, here's the join or die political cartoon. We also have a lot of images that students can analyze. This, of course, is the Castillo de San Marcos. This is an interesting drawing of Florida militia. This is another interesting depiction of a battle. We have two representations of a view of Pensacola. We have this one, which is the original, and then we also have this one, which was hand colored by somebody at the University of West Florida's Archaeology Institute. Here's the image that Dr. Head showed you from his presentation on his slide. And then we have some fun recipes that you can do with your students. I haven't dove into any of these, but the whole idea of grape ketchup was a little different to me, and I think it will be very different to your students. So all of this, oops, I did it again, sorry. I'm going to go backwards again. All of this information is listed with this on our curriculum supplements page. We can send you print copies of the publication. We did send print copies to various counties throughout the state of Florida already, but not everybody received them. But I do have a stock of them. So if you are interested in getting print copies of this it's a 16-page supplement. I'd be happy to send those to you. You can look through the PDF. You can certainly also post parts if you wanted to clip a map and show that on your Canvas page. You can certainly do that as well. We have lots of there's lots of different things on history. We did a recent this is focused on the Holocaust, exploring the Holocaust through primary sources. We also did a publication for if I can find it, the anniversary of Separate but Not Equal of Brown versus Board of Education. There's all kinds of, we did videos, there are videos here. There's a teacher guide, there's a publication, and all of this you can download for free. So I am just going to go back to our homepage. If you are interested in getting the newspaper in your classroom, all you do is go to our homepage and click sign up here. And there's a little form for you to fill out. If you are in Hernando, Hillsborough, Pinellas, and Pasco counties, you can get print copies of the newspaper. If you are outside of those areas, we have the digital edition, and I'm just going to show you that in a minute as well. There's a drop-down menu here. If you click on the drop-down, you will see a list of schools. If your school doesn't happen to be on there, you can certainly send me an email, and we will get your school on there. When you go back here, here is where you would log in. You and your students would log into the e-edition. This is an exact replica of the newspaper. Oops. And it is produced 7 days a week. It is it's a PDF, so you can actually save articles. There's a place on here where you can, I believe, yes, if you hit print, you can pick a page, you can pick a whole section, and you can print and you can save that as a PDF. You can also do clippings. And you can also search the archives. So there are two ways to search the archives. One, I think they put 2 months here, but there's also a search feature up here where if you put in specific keywords, it will find a newspaper that goes a little further back. One of the things I find really interesting about this is students have to be careful about how they're going to search. So for example, if I put the word raise in there, I'm going to get information about the weather. I'm going to get information about the baseball team. Same thing with lightning. I'm going to have the same issue. So students have to be specific about what it is they are looking for. There is also, when you click on an article, I was trying to find one that is not political. Okay, let's look at this one. When you click on an article, there is also a translate feature that you can translate the article into Spanish. And then the last really cool, oh, is it going to let me back? It is not going to let me go back. Okay, wait, I have to go back to the beginning. The last really cool feature that it has is, let me go back here. Let's see if it's going to let me log on. Yes, it did. Sorry, I'm a little slow here. Let me share again. There we go. There's also and I'm not seeing it up here. I think my list is in my way. Wait, hold on. There is an audio function as well. Oh, there it is. So you can actually have the newspaper article read aloud to the students while they read it. And this, you can print specific articles. You can make the print bigger. You can make the print smaller. There's all kinds of cool features with the digital edition. One of the things that we like to encourage is teachers to use this for homework assignments. Um, Students, I use it actually for homework assignments a lot with my college students. Again, they're not very familiar with things that are going on in the world. One of the things I love to use newspaper articles for is cause and effect. Because it is a great way to see how one thing impacts another. The advertisements can be used for comparison contrast. We do have on our website, if you go to the language arts page, we do have some elementary activities on there. And then we also have a teacher guide that is should be on the language arts page as well, that has like 80 different ways to use the newspaper, everything from looking for capital letters to finding short vowels, long vowels, to actually digging more into content. I'm going to switch back to my PowerPoint. Okay, so this is, as I said, this is our website, tampabay.com/NIE. This will tell you again how to sign up. Again, if you are in those counties listed at the top, we will deliver print editions of the papers to you. The print paper is published Sunday and Wednesday. We deliver the Sunday papers to your schools on Wednesday. If your school is outside of these areas, we are happy to give you access to the electronic edition. I know that teachers do like to have the physical newspapers, but a lot of times students are just so used to using the computer that it's much easier. I do have quite a few schools listed under each county, but again, if you are in a private school or a charter school or a homeschool that's not listed, please let me know and I will be happy to help. I also want to mention this. This is brand new. This is from Florida Humanities. If you are not a member of Florida Humanities or you are not familiar with them, they produce a magazine called Forum. It is a great magazine. It is available online. Even if you're not a member, you can download the magazine, I believe, in PDF form. Their website is just floridahumanities.org, but they have created a new forum that is for middle school students. And let's see if I can, I don't know if it's going to jump over. Can you all see my screen? Can you all see the website? Or is it still showing the, okay, good. So this is the new website. There's reading guides, there's stories. One of the really cool things about this is it is Florida focused. So if you're looking for international informational text, this is a great source. I'm just going to click on one of them. This gives you, it's kind of broken up with images, and the text is manageable for younger students. I helped find some of these images for them and helped a little bit with the editing. The images are all from either Library of Congress or Florida Memory. There's all kinds of really cool things on here. And I think, and I'm not seeing, I didn't actually, let's see if I can find it. Yes, at the end of the stories, there are discussion questions. And again, you can use those as discussion prompts, or you can actually have your students write something about them. But these are all great stories. And I will, when I post the video, I'll also make sure that I post the link. But if you do go to the Florida Humanities website, the main one, I believe if you go under forum, if you go under forum, you will see the forum for young readers. So this is a really cool tool if you are looking to bring more Florida history and more Florida focused images, that sort of thing into your classroom. And I'm going to stop sharing and go back here. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. This is what I wanted to do. There we go. So this is my contact information. Most of you got an email from me because you're here. So you got an email letting you know what time the webinar was and all that other kind of stuff. But you can email me if you have any questions. I am happy to try to help you out with things. One of the reasons that we have been focusing a lot on making sure that the Florida standards are with the activities is because teachers have asked us to do that. Whenever teachers are bringing new materials into their classrooms, a lot of times they have to show how they're affiliated with the standards. Another thing I'm going to mention about our curriculum supplements, when we send those to schools, we do have to get permission, especially from Hillsborough County. So all of our materials that are going into schools are actually reviewed by the district supervisors in Hillsborough County. When we work with Polk County, they usually ask us what Hillsborough County is doing. So a lot of times the supervisors have already looked at the information. It doesn't mean that they're saying, yes, absolutely use it in your classroom, but they let us know if there's anything controversial. So we try to make sure that things are not too out there for you. One of the things I will recommend, especially if you are using the actual newspaper, is just that you take a look at it before you share it with your students. One of my favorite stories is my predecessor was telling me how excited they were when they first started to go into Pasco County classrooms. They had this wonderful Pasco County section that was separate. And the first day of school that they sent the papers, there was this wonderful article about a woman who is a painter, and she was from Pasco County. Unfortunately, the way she painted was unique because she painted with her breasts. So that was kind of the first article that went into schools. So again, you might want to keep an eye on that before you hand out newspapers. You can definitely look at the e-edition first. The e-edition will come out first thing in the morning, so you can peruse that first. The newspapers are usually delivered somewhere between 4 and 6 a.m. So they should be there for you when you need them for class. That was a lot of information. Does anybody have any questions? You can unmute or you can put them in the chat. We are signing up teachers now for newspapers in the fall. You don't have in August. You don't have to sign up now for August, but if you are planning ahead, you can certainly do that. Also, if you are an NIE teacher right now, you will have access to the e-edition over the summer. If you are not an NIE teacher now, if you have not signed up for the newspaper, shoot me an email and I can give you access so that you can play around with the digital edition and see what it's like before the next school year starts. So if there's no questions, I'm going to do a little drawing for you. I believe that one of you didn't have a full name listed. So let me just go back and make sure that I have everybody. Oops. Let me stop sharing. Let me see. I think the person who didn't have a last name dropped off. Okay. So you do need to be present to win. We are raffling off a wait, I'll tell you if I can find it. I believe, and I don't have one handy. It is a Applebee's gift certificate. And I believe that they are for, here we go. Yes, $25. So I have a $25 Applebee's gift certificate, and I am going to, I lost my little Zoom screen. Sorry, it's been a really long week. I'm sure some of you can relate to that. I'm going to share again so you can see my cool little wheel. There we go. There we are. So oops, I didn't mean to leave David's name in there. Let's get rid of David's name. Okay, I think I have everybody else's name. And I'm just going to, oops, see if there's any comments. Longest week ever, yeah. Actually, this has been a really long month on the one hand. On the other hand, I have no idea how we got to April. Okay, so here's my little spinner, and we're going to spin. And the winner is Rosalind. Is Rosalind here? Let's make sure she's here before oops. There we are. Okay. So I will get your information from you via email, Rosalind. Congratulations. And I will also be sending a certificate of completion to everybody. So I do have your email addresses, and I will try to get that out to you as soon as possible. I will also be posting the video, the PowerPoint, and somebody asked me about a transcript. If I push the correct button, I will be able to do that as well. So if you don't have any other questions, I will let you have the last few minutes of your evening left. I hope you all have a great rest of the year. And I just want to reiterate what they said at the beginning. It is awesome that you guys are spending your time after teaching all day, that you spent it with us. So thank you very much for being here.